Hey Fitheads, today we talk with Lisa Kricfalusi. She is an expert in cold exposure, sauna, rewilding, primal therapy, that kind of thing. And holy crap, this was fun.
And an expert in mitochondria. A lot of mitochondria talk for a fitness bro meathead podcast.
I know. It's such a crazy combination of woo and science. We had all of the things that talk to my analytical brain and then all of the nature spiritual things too.
Yeah, it was fun. I mean, I was impressed with your opening salvo there of just starting like, "Hey, great to see you. Thanks for coming on the podcast. Oh, by the way, Max doesn't believe in cold stuff," and I'm like, ah.
You know your life's mission? Max hates it.
Yeah, I know. I was like, I don't
And
hate
she
it.
has
I just haven't
handled
been
so well.
I was like, I don't hate it. I just haven't been convinced. And she was like, well, and she got me. I'm down to try it.
I thought I was convinced before this podcast, and now I'm thoroughly convinced. I'm not even going to get a cold plunge. I'm just going to move to Canada.
Welcome to Total Fitheads.
Serious fitness for not so serious people.
Hi, Lisa. Welcome.
Hi, Allie. Max. So excited to be here.
So glad to have you. So, can we first just get a background on you? Let the fitheads know how you got to where you are right now.
Yeah, a little bit of background on me. I mean, I guess we can kind of go in a few different directions here, but um, where I am now is I'm a brand owner, kinesiologist, I teach breath work, I'm a coach, and we founded a brand called Unbounded. How I actually got there was probably probably not what most people would have expected. I used to swim for Canada. I did synchronized swimming, so it wasn't the typical racing and the swimming that you would think of when you think about competitive swimming.
Right. It was the hard one.
It was the hard one. Everyone thinks about the synchronized swimming, and I know it's in like a lot of jokes, but it's actually really hard.
It's incredibly hard.
You
Yeah,
got to do it with
so
other people. Ugh.
you know what? I did all of the things. I was one of those go-getters as a kid. So I did the solo, the duet, the combo, and then I coached it, went to kinesiology, and then the management side of sports. And then once I graduated, I worked for the sports science facility for Toronto, the Argonauts. And I did that for a little while until the Pan Am Games came to town, and the Toronto Pan Am Games were in 2015. So their organizing committee was set up a lot earlier than 2015. And so with my aquatics background, I helped manage the fitness center, membership services for their crown jewel of the games, which was their diving tank, their swim pool, their 50-meter pool, training pool, and their racing pool. And I wish that facility was available when I was young. And so it was a tri-party between the City of Toronto, the University of Toronto, and then the Sports Science Institute of Toronto as well. So that's their provincial athletes, that's their national athletes. And so I got to be thrown into the deep end sort of right after I graduated. And then that went really well. I acquired 16 other venues doing operations for the games. And then I went to Australia for a quick minute. To do the Com Games when that was coming to Gold Coast, Australia. So I worked at a surf life-saving club called Northcliffe at the time to get ready for that and to get my feet wet there while that whole games and community was ramping up. And then that's where everything just kind of went wrong. I had my passport stolen. My grandfather passed away. So I came home. My dad got diagnosed with lung cancer at the time. And so I didn't go back to Australia. I stayed. And then the folks at Pan Am Games were like, oh, you're back. Do you want a job? We're doing all these other things now in operations. And so I started working for Compass Group Canada at the time, Levy Restaurants, managing and negotiating for like all their ops stuff. So then I started negotiating for large spend GPO businesses, and GPO stands for Group Purchasing Organization. So lots of contract management for big companies. And then Red Bull hired me for a couple of years to manage that entire sector for their business in Canada. And then while I was working for Red Bull, I sort of like lost the wellness side of myself. And then I started practicing. So I had like one foot in wellness, one foot in corporate world. And I started bridging that world by teaching people how to feel better, teaching people how to breathe better, leveraged everything I learned from coaching and synchronized swimming and my kin degree, brought it into the corporate space. And then I figured, okay, like I'm going to keep doing this. It feels really good. Then I had another crazy thing that happened, which was all of this grief all at once. Dad passed away, had a crazy miscarriage, had a car accident, and 7 concussions that were consecutive. Super, super depressing. And my grandmother, of all people at the time, was just watching me go through this, and she's Finnish. Growing up, I went to Finland as a kid, and I learned all about cold, all about hot, all about sauna, primal wellness living. And she just like asked me one day, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing? And she's like, you're not watching the sunrise, you're not, going outside, you're not doing your hot, you're not doing your cold, just do it for 10 days, just do it for 10 days in a row. So I did. I documented it. That turned into 20 days, 50 days, 200 days, 600 days, 1,000 days, and on and on and on. While I was working for Red Bull at the time, I just started teaching people how to do it. And this was sort of like the start of the pandemic. People didn't know what to do. They couldn't go outside. They couldn't go to the regular fitness routine. But and lockdown in Ontario was absolutely horrendous. It was like well known to be like one of the worst. And then from there, I started teaching people how to do breath work, how to do cold exposure outdoors, why sauna is important. And this was 5 years ago now, 4 years ago. And that sort of sparked this desire inside to continue doing what I was doing and to start finding a way to bring it to more people. And there was a community that invited me to go to a cold plunging group on the other side of the city. And that's where I met Nick. That's where I met Zach. And that's where I met Ron, who are the other founders of Unbounded. And that community group grew over the years from a community to a brand to a business. And now we offer classes, workshops, retreats, and mini festivals in primal wellness therapy where we teach people, we provide a peak experience in what we're teaching them. So it's education, it's experience, and then it's empowerment by giving them the tools to do it themselves. And then a community underlying that to encourage them to continue coming out and practicing. So that's my meandering story of how I got to where I am.
So super boring.
Super boring.
Definitely unimpressive. What a journey.
Holy moly.
I feel bad throwing you into this because I don't think we gave you a heads up. Max is a very big skeptic of cold exposure in general. So
Awesome.
You're dealing with someone who's difficult in this category.
I would say I'm a big skeptic for everything, in fairness.
Fine.
I didn't believe in calories for the longest time. And then I was like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. I didn't believe, in stretching. I still don't, but now I've been doing it every day for this whole entire year, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, I guess, could you sell me on cold?
Yeah,
I'm a skeptic, but I'm happy to be won over, if that makes I'd love to be won over.
First of all, I'd love to know, have you tried it? Or is this something that you're like, I'm never touching that in the world. I hate being cold. Or how do you feel about being
I don't like being cold. I grew up in Boston and I hated the winter, and the dark made me sad. And I didn't play hockey or skiing, or I didn't look forward to, I guess I liked sledding kind of, but I didn't look forward to the winter very much. And then I didn't like being cold in life. Now, that being said, we do the fitness podcast. We've met a lot of fitness people, and I've heard of cold exposure, and I've heard how great it is, and I've done it quite a bit. And I also wonder if I haven't done it enough or haven't done it consistently enough. But I've tried it, and I'm happy to keep trying it. I just would love to be convinced. I'm definitely open to it. I like it. We did what did we do? Oh, I did a Wim Hof experience where I did that breathing style, and then we dunked into the tank for a while. That was fun. It was a fun experience, but I guess I didn't really understand what was happening to me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I understood. It's become really popularized, and our entire lives we're wired to believe that cold is bad. Don't go outside with your hair wet if you lived in a cold environment because you're going to catch a cold, or like anything cold in terms of your body being cold, your hands, your feet being cold. It's associated with being uncomfortable. It's associated with catching a cold, even though you can't really catch a cold from being cold. You can really only catch a cold from germs and viruses and things like that. So I'm happy to talk to any skeptics about it, and cold exposure. Listen, it's not for everyone. Just like yoga isn't for everyone. Just like breath work isn't for everyone. It is a tool in your toolbox to experience a shift, and just like all of the modalities, even strength training, there's different ways to pick up a weight, whether it's, concentric or eccentric loading or whatever you're doing to influence a shift and influence a change. So cold is the same thing. There are many reasons why someone would show up to practice cold water therapy, whether it's, in a cold shower or even in outdoors if you're not even using water. But like if you're going for a walk outdoors and you want to get chilly, if you're using a cold shower, if you're doing a cold ice bath, a water immersion, if you're getting into moving cold water, or an ice pool as an example. So the Wim Hof method is definitely a popularized method, and a lot of folks enter the whole world of cold exposure, doing it that way. And that's one way to for sure experience cold exposure. So the reason why anyone would do cold exposure, there's different reasons. So if it's physical, if it's mental, if it's emotional, there are plenty of different reasons why you would actually show up to a cold environment. And a lot of people do it, one, because they're curious, two, because they've heard it's good for you, three, because someone's dragged them to this thing, or a coach is being like, you got to do your cold bath for recovery. And another reason could be that it helps with like PTSD or trauma related symptoms. So the physical benefits of cold exposure, and let's just use cold water immersion as an example, since you use the Wim Hof method as something that you've tried. When you put your body into water that's 10 degrees Celsius, apologize for the conversion. I'm like, what's Celsius? Yeah, it's 10 degrees Celsius or less.
What is that in freedom degrees?
Yeah, it's like less than 40. Let's say like 30. I mean, like 30, 35 is around like my favorite in terms of Fahrenheit. But yeah, you have a response. You have a physiological response. And sometimes that response is actually anticipatory before you get in. You have you can feel your heart rate increase, your respiratory, your breathing rate might increase. And it's actually just norepinephrine or adrenaline swimming into your bloodstream, sometimes 3 to 5 times over baseline. And that happens the second you actually get in, because your body is like, you're in danger, get out. So all of those alarm bells are going off saying that you are in danger. That's your sympathetic nervous system switching on. That's your fight or flight response. So that's when that norepinephrine, when that adrenaline goes 5 times over baseline, you have a physiological response. And everyone in this world has felt it before, whether they've had a stressful text or a stressful email come through, or a close call in a car or in sports. You've had that flutter before, where you felt that that arousal state. It's an aroused state where your body is ready to fight, flee, or I guess just run away from any danger, essentially. And so when that happens, you go through vasoconstriction, and your blood essentially goes into your core to protect your vital organs, right? And your extremities, your hands and your feet, they're not as important. So all the cool blood actually hangs out in your extremities. So that's why people have that numbness and tingling in their hands and their feet. So when you first step into the cold, you have that response. And that alone has a number of benefits. When you actually step into that state and you become more stressed, and you have that increase in norepinephrine in your blood, and you have that warm blood go to your core to protect your vital organs. Essentially, when that warm blood comes out, when you get out of the cold, it's almost like your blood vessels get a little bit of a workout, because you go through vasoconstriction, you go through vasodilation, and when that cool blood comes back out, and that or the warm blood comes back out and that cool blood comes back in, you actually you can actually feel it happening. And so that's giving your circulatory system a little bit of a workout. The vasoconstriction and vasodilation. Not very many things give you that contrast in that workout. So that's really, really good for your body. The other thing that it does, that norepinephrine is a precursor to dopamine. So your mood is elevated. You actually feel a little bit more confident. And when you move through that heightened state of arousal, that climb of the dip to a state of calm and parasympathetic activation, that shift actually recalibrates your stress response to a baseline that you didn't have before. So anything else that shows up for the rest of your day just simply isn't as stressful because you've done the most stressful thing and the most stressful part of your day. And so that's also really good. And then the cold alone, anytime you have inflammation in your body, whether you've fallen or you've broken a bone or you've sprained an ankle, you put ice on it, and that's to get rid of inflammation. When you put your entire body into cold water, you're actually treating global inflammation in your body. So that's another reason why it's good. And marginally, even if it is marginally, it does help your immune system. So it increases your body's response to any sort of immune system threat. And the way that it does that is it increases your white blood cells, increases your T cells, and the way that they actually show up. And when I say show up, it's really how efficient they are. And so that's a really cool thing as well. And even if it is marginal, it also helps regulate your metabolism. So, and the metabolism stuff is an entire concept, and there's the jury's out on how much does it really influence your metabolism, and how much does it really burn calories and things like that. But what it does do is it creates an opportunity for your body's core temperature to decrease. So remember what I said about when you first step in, that cool blood stays in your extremities, the warm blood's at your core, but when you get out and that cycles out, that cool blood in your extremities comes back in. So your core body temperature actually decreases after you get out. So when that happens, your body's response to that is shivering. And shivering is a bit of a hack for metabolism support. And the reason why that is it activates a system called thermogenesis. And so when your body is going through thermogenesis, what happens is it takes your stored energy, your white adipose tissue, that's the blubbery fat that we all know and love and hate, and whatever relationship that you have with your white adipose tissue is your own. But what it does is it takes it out of storage and then it metabolizes it. So in order to burn fat, you have to take it out of storage, and then you actually have to metabolize it and oxidate it. And so that's what shivering helps with. There's fun fact, a little molecule called succinate that gets released when you're shivering, helps mobilize the fat out of storage, and then your mitochondria and the powerhouses of your cells to warm up your body, they'll leverage all of that wonderful mobilized stored fat, and they'll use it as fuel to warm up your body and increase your body temperature. So those are a few reasons why cold water immersion is something that you might want to do. So I hope that helps, Max, with a couple of things.
Tremendously.
Just a handful.
Yeah, it seems like it's one of those things like sleep's like, oh, do you have any problems? That could probably help.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things. But I mean, to summarize kind of all of that, it's really great to increase your mood, your attention, your focus from a neurotransmitter and hormonal perspective, helps with global inflammation, helps with your metabolism, helps with your immune system, and it also helps with natural antioxidants in your body and your bloodstream. And the other thing that it does is it releases cold shock protein. So if you have any neurodegenerative concerns or issues, and we all have nerve cells that are damaged, it actually helps repair what's called the myelin sheath to repair those cells. So if you have, early onset Alzheimer's, or if you are someone who has dementia in your family, you might want to practice cold therapy to help mitigate that risk.
Man, I gotta move to Antarctica.
Yeah. Before we get it, I have a couple of sort of housekeeping questions, if that's okay.
Of course, yeah.
How long, how many times a day or a week, what time of
year.
day before? Yeah, once a lifetime. Is that going to work? Before, after the workout, before or after a meal, stuff like, can you nitty gritty stuff like that?
Yeah, some housekeeping items about why are in like the typical protocols of cold plunging. So let's start with your first cold plunge. Yeah, so if you're showing up and it's your first time, there's a couple things to consider. There are contraindications associated with it: high, low blood pressure, if you're pregnant, um, if you have any heart conditions, if you have something called Raynaud's disease, which is essentially you lose circulation in your hands, your feet, and your extremities, and it feels quite uncomfortable. So I would definitely look at, is cold plunging really for you? That's a real check housekeeping item. Second to that would be figuring out the environment for you. So why are you coming to cold plunging? Is it for a muscle recovery? Is it for, treating inflammation? Is it for your metabolism? Like, find out your why, and then you'll find out your protocol. And so when you first try cold exposure, just know that the scariest things to happen, especially if you go into, full submersion up to your shoulders, is there's a couple things to note. The hands and the feet, that circulation might feel painful. There might be some referred pain there in your hands and your feet if you don't have really great circulation. There's a gasp reflex that happens. It's a non-negotiable when you step into cold water. It's that same feeling when you jumped into a cold pool as a kid, or you splash cold water in your face, and it's a feeling. If your lungs are full and you step in on full inhale and you don't have any more room in your lungs to breathe in, it can send you into a bit of a panicky feeling because you can't get any more air in. So that can feel challenging. So the recommendation is actually to step into cold in your practice space on an exhale. So your lungs have room to take that breath in when your breath feels like it's being taken away. And then from there, all you have to do is just kind of grit and bear it in terms of riding the incline of what's called I call it the climb. So essentially it's regulating your breath, and it's taking your nervous system's response for that stressful state into a state of calm. And it's by doing a double inhale and long exhale. And doing that over and over and over again until your heart rate slows down, until your breathing rate slows down, until you feel like you can simply stay. And when you feel like you can simply stay, that's when you're done. It takes about 90 seconds for most people, sometimes 2 minutes, sometimes less, depending on how cold it is. And then the protocols in terms of selecting the levers to maneuver with cold exposure is time, temperature, surface area. So if you're just starting, you want to pick, a temperature that isn't associated with an ego. If it's cold enough where it feels cold and you really want to get out, but you can stay in safely, that's essentially the temperature you want to start at. And then from there, it's really playing with the time and then the surface area. So if it's your first cold plunge and you want to get in at an uncomfortable but cold and safe to stay in temperature, it's really great to try and make it to what feels like a time where you've regulated your nervous system, where you can breathe a little easier, you can breathe a little better. And that is different for everyone. I like to aim for 2 minutes. If someone really needs to focus on a time, 2 minutes is a great time to work up towards, even if you only make it, 5 seconds to 10 seconds to 13 seconds until you get to, 2 minutes. But really, it's all about regulating your breathing and knowing all of those watch outs, that gas reflex, your hands, your feet, things like that. And then in terms of time of day, the best and most practical for everyone is actually right in the morning. And the reason for that is because you get to stack, your baseline stress response. It is the hardest part of your day for your body. Your body doesn't really know the difference between different types of stressors. And so when you have that non-negotiable norepinephrine dump into your bloodstream, your heart rate, all those things, your body's response to stress gets recalibrated. And so right now, if you're working on your metabolism, if you don't want to become something called cold adapted, which is essentially build a tolerance to cold, you want to play within a specific range. And so Susanna Soberg's work, she does a ton of work on metabolism. She does on recommend now her average is 11 minutes per week of cold and actually 57 minutes a week of hot if you're doing sauna as well, in terms of the longevity benefits and the benefits on your metabolism. So that's a really great recommendation in terms of amount per week, but a lot of people use that as a baseline. And then depending on why they're using the cold, they'll lean into, going in and out of the cold, or they'll have a little bit more intense in terms of temperature, maybe less time. If they're doing something related to focus, mood, attention, vigilance for like an afternoon meeting. So you get into these nuances of why you would actually practice cold therapy. And then in terms of food, I recommend doing it 2 hours after you eat. Just like running, just like exercising, just like anything else. There's a nicer window if you're not, fully digesting. You want your body to focus on digestion when you're digesting. So those are some ideas in terms of how to start. In terms of time, temperature, surface area with levers, and in terms of times per week, 11 minutes would be great. And you can break that up into as many sessions as you'd like.
The 11-minute session, does that count?
11-minute session would be pretty intense, but yeah, you can definitely, it definitely counts in terms of the research.
Okay.
But it wouldn't be necessary. You get all of the physical benefits. With the most latest research, it's 5 minutes. Up to 5 minutes, you get the autophagy thing and the cell regeneration starting to happen. But in terms of like most of the physical benefits for why someone would practice cold water therapy, 90 seconds to 2 minutes is plenty. Some people would argue stay for 4 minutes, and some other aficionados would say 5 minutes, depending on what your goals are.
Okay, but nobody's saying over 5. We're good. Okay.
No one needs to. If you do, you're either cold adapted, where your body just isn't getting the physiological response that you would need in order to get that benefit of inflammation or whatever you're looking for, your metabolism, things like that. Your core body temperature just doesn't go down as fast, but it's mostly associated with ego if anyone stays beyond 5 minutes. So we teach people to regulate your nervous system. Once you feel like you can stay is when you get out. Dr. Andrew Huberman teaches resilience through cold water therapy, and he calls it counting walls, where, if you feel resistance, like you don't want to get in, or if you feel resistance when you get in that you want to get out, or anytime you feel resistance, it's counting walls, and it's building your grit, it's building resilience, it's building tolerance to stress in a way where you actually have a stressor and you overcome it and you keep going. And so that rewires your nervous system in a different way as well. Another fun fact about cold exposure with anything cognitive related is your frontal lobe is actually depressed, sometimes 60 to 80% when you're in the experience. So it gives you an opportunity to rewire your nervous system in a way that's just not accessible in any other area, unless you're, on recreational drugs or drugs for that are designed for that specific experience. But when you have that response from your neurotransmitters and your hormones, and it's a combination between norepinephrine and acetylcholine. And what happens, you have that opportunity to rewire your nervous system because the rest of those pathways are just not online. So if you can visualize a time when you felt something you're working on, maybe it's gratitude, when you felt the most grateful in your life, and you can actually go there in your mind, it rewires and creates more neural pathways that are associated with that feeling and that response, so that it's more of a default to you than maybe not feeling grateful or not acting and being in gratitude, which is super fascinating.
Well, that's a totally new. I'd never heard of that. They're like, get in and just try not to die. Not like, or they're like, get in and don't forget to breathe. I'm like, okay, I can do that. But so you're saying like you get in and you have something you want to sort of meditate on or think about or focus on or whatever, and that allows you to do that easier.
Rewire.
Yeah, it helps you rewire. So once your frontal lobe is 60 to 80% offline, then you really have this cool opportunity in that moment. And the easiest way to rewire your nervous system is to go there in your mind. So eyes closed, you're visualizing the time where you felt like the most confident version of yourself, and you know who was there. You really visualize every detail that you possibly can and how you're feeling in that moment. And once you've regulated your breath, once you've regulated your nervous system and you can breathe easy, you can simply stay, that's the sweet spot where you can rewire your nervous system's response to whatever you're really working towards. Or if you're working on struggling with limiting beliefs, you can start changing your physiological response to that associated limiting belief or that feeling by rewiring your nervous system in that moment, which is so cool. But yeah.
See, what's happening, Max, is you get in a cold plunge and you're annoyed at cold plunge people. And so you're rewiring your brain to be annoyed as your default state.
That's exactly what I've been doing. Ah, this sucks. Oh, wait a minute.
Yeah, but if you're having fun, it's dreadful. Getting into cold water is absolutely terrible. It sucks every single time, but just like anything that's hard, once you move through it, you do feel better, especially with that dopamine response afterwards that helps with motivation, pursuit, and reward. It's the best thing that you can do for your entire body in less than 2 minutes, in my opinion. That's why I'm so passionate about it.
So, of all these days of practice in a row that you've done, it still sucks for you. That's what you're saying?
It still sucks every single time. You don't like getting into cold water. That response, just like anything else that's hard. You don't look forward to it. You look forward to the after effects. You look forward to the feeling after the run or the feeling after the workout, on those endorphins when they're flying through your body. That's the feeling that you want. It's not, putting your sneakers on and hitting the pavement in that moment necessarily. Some people, they love it, but most people are like, ugh, got to do this thing.
It's like doing a shot.
Exactly. So I hope that helps paint a bit of a picture as to like why you would, entertain.
Absolutely. I think a lot of times that was a very sort of, thank you for that specific answer. A lot of times people are like, "Oh man, it's good for everything," and I'm like, "What does that mean?" And they're like, "Oh, just get in." I'm like,
Just
okay.
get in.
Yeah.
Is it the same with
So you don't
if you get into cold air or these? I mean, Allie, we've done crypto or cryo tanks, haven't we? Or
yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's a really great question. So when you get into a cryo chamber, sure, they're like really, really cold air. And you do experience some benefits. However, it's subcutaneous, which means that it's just kind of like the surface of your skin. It doesn't actually penetrate as deep, and it's because the air is just not as dense as water. And then in terms of the capacity for temperature to be diffused through air. And what I mean by that is when you're outside and you're cooling your body, it takes a lot longer for your core body temperature to actually decrease in air versus in water, because water is a better conductor of heat. So it actually takes on the heat a lot faster than air would. So it's much more intense.
Yeah.
I've got an idea. If denser is better, Max, we're doing a Jello cold plunge.
Cold mud?
Yeah, you could. I think it would. I'm not sure. Actually, that's an interesting question. Something to think about. I think it really just has to do with how fast and how much heat can be conducted with the substance that you're actually up against. And the easiest way for the beginners who really don't want to put their entire body into cold water is actually exposing your hands, your feet, and just your face. That's a really great beginner way to start. And it's because on our palms, on our feet, and then the upper parts of your face where men don't actually grow facial hair in this area, it's called glabrous skin. And what that means essentially is it shunts the blood from your arteries to your veins, and it doesn't actually go through capillaries. So what that does is more blood can pass through, and when more blood passes through, it can cool it, right? So your core body temperature can cool it a lot faster. And so that's why when people need to cool down really quickly, if they're putting like a cold compress on like the back of their neck, that's actually the wrong place to put it. You want to put it in your hands, you want to put it in your feet, you want to put it in your face.
Whoa. Yeah, I think Dave Asprey talks about just doing his face in as his hack. Do you think that that's not useful, or?
It's definitely useful. It'll help with inflammation for sure. And it does give you that gasp reflex. And that gasp reflex is actually actually associated with activating your parasympathetic nervous system. So it does bring calm to it. And this is another thing that you can actually add on to it and start stacking your cold exposure. You can actually hum like on your exhales and bring your vagus nerve into it. And when you do that, it sounds and looks a little bit silly, of course, as you could imagine, but it would activate that rest and reset response even more. So if you suffer from anxiety, or if you really need to calm down really quickly, putting your hands or your face into cold water and just like exhaling with a like a deep sigh or hum and bringing some like audio into it will actually help you calm down quicker, and activate that's non-stress response pathway, that rest and reset pathway.
It seems so counterintuitive. I'm thinking, oh, I'm so stressed out. Why would I add more stress on top of it? But yeah, like you said, it's a recalibration.
Yeah, just like going into a sauna, just like running. It's called hormetic stress. And hormetic stress essentially is anything that doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So that's when you do an extra rep to failure. Your muscle fibers tear, they rebuild, they grow, and you become stronger. It's very similar with saunas, your endurance, if you're an endurance athlete, with cardio and sprints as an example, and cold exposure. And so you can definitely leverage it as a tool for that as well.
That double breath thing, I experience that sometimes throughout the day. I've heard that's your body trying to reset and go into parasympathetic. Is that true?
Yeah, you can watch babies do it. If you have a dog at home, when they're about to calm down, or when they're tired and they're about to like lay down and flop down, once they do that, you can actually see them do their own physiological sigh, and it's and then really long extended exhale. I'm sure most people who have had animals at home can attest to that. But yeah, you do it all the time, all day long, and it's your body's natural way of resetting back to that baseline and activating that parasympathetic autonomic nervous system pathway to bring your heart rate down, and to make you feel more calm, more at ease, and less stressed. You do it in your sleep as well. If people have kids at home, they'll notice little kids do it as well. It's really nice. But yeah, it's really just the double inhale actually allows any of the little sacs in your lungs called alveoli expand, because they could be collapsed on themselves. So it just means that you're able to get more oxygen and more oxygen delivery to your tissues by doing a full inhale, bringing in that extra sip of air at the top, and then really long extended exhale through the mouth and exhale out the mouth. And you can do that by pursing your lips. And that is a non-negotiable way to influence slowing down your heart rate.
I didn't realize that I do that before bed. I'm like, that's bizarre that I had never realized that I did that. I do my own thing.
That's great.
So how important is connecting the breath work to the cold exposure? Because like Max said, a lot of us have come across Wim Hof, and it's all about this like power breathing has to be before the cold. Is that true? Are there other options, or can I just go in?
Yeah, it's such a good question. Breath, and it's its whole thing. So when you influence your breathing rate, you can actually influence how acidic your body is, how oxygenated it is, how much CO2 is in your bloodstream, and how much oxygen is being delivered to your tissues and your cells. So divers would, do breath work before they, do deep dive. Athletes leverage breath work when they're in the beginning of a race, the middle of the race, the end of a race. Breath is so important for so many different things, and it is a tool that you can actually start leaning on when you're looking for a specific outcome. So when I show up to my cold practice, what I would do is I would think about, okay, where am I sending my breath? Am I anxious right now? Am I needing much more energy right now? Or do I just need to reset and balance the level of oxygen and the level of carbon dioxide, let's say, in my blood? And so there's different ways to actually do that. You can do upregulated breathing. You can over-oxygenate your blood. and you can get into cold water. And that's very similar to something called sumo breathing, the Wim Hof method, cyclic hyperventilation. Those are all techniques and upregulated techniques to overoxygenate your body. You don't need to do that in order to practice cold therapy. Being aware of your breath is really the key. And so the first thing that I like to instruct people on is, where are you sending your breath? Are you feeling upregulated, balanced, or downregulated? And upregulated is like more anxious, more stressed out. And downregulated is like, okay, I need a little energy. I'm really lethargic right now. I just woke up. I don't really feel like doing this. I'm dragging my feet. And then balanced is, you don't feel either. You feel pretty balanced, and you want the benefits of maybe getting upregulated in the water, or that state of calm and rest once you get out, let's say. So it's really just like, where am I now? Where am I going? And how can I influence and use my breath to do that? So really the first piece is just being connected to your breath. So bring your mind to your body and noticing where you're sending your breath, if it's in your chest, if it's in your belly. And most people breathe out of their chest. They're acidic, and they're overoxygenated. And so just like breathing from your belly and taking deep diaphragmatic breaths is something that I instruct at the beginning. And then from there, I get people to practice what it feels like to hold their breath in a breath retention. And Navy SEALs use this. Snipers use this technique. It's box breathing. It's to calm down your body right before an event. And so it actually helps balance the level of O2 and CO2 in your blood and your body. And any rhythmic breathing pattern where the inhales and the exhales are the same in terms of the cadence will help do that. So that's an inhale to the top of your breath, a hold for the same amount of duration, an exhale to the bottom of your breath, lungs empty, and hold at the bottom. And so that pattern you can lengthen to 2 breaths, to 2 counts, to 4 counts, to 6 counts, to 8 counts, as long as you can, until you feel balanced and calm. And then upregulated breathing is the sumo breath. It's Wim Hof method. It's cyclic hyperventilation, where you're over-oxygenating your body. And so that can be dangerous if you're doing it in the water. So we never do it in the water, and you always want to make sure that you're partnered with someone, just because there have been more fatalities than ever associated with cold exposure, with people just not doing it properly, or not doing it with the right supervision, or not doing it safely. And so breath work can actually move a lot of different things in your body in terms of how much oxygen your brain is getting, how much oxygen the rest of your body is actually getting, and it can be dangerous. So you just want to make sure you're doing it safely and with the right education.
Yeah, I remember one of the biggest sort of eye openers for me was I forget what it was, but we were mini science experiment. I was testing how long you hold your breath, and you do that, and then you try it again, but you over oxygenate a ton, and then you see how long you can hold your breath, and it's significantly longer. And that was one of my first, this is middle school or whatever. That was one of my first, like, I can affect myself by different I can do different things.
Yeah.
And don't do any high level thinking while you're
seriously.
You're not doing any GPO large spend negotiations while you're in cold therapy. I'm guessing you need your frontal lobe for that.
Yeah, you definitely do if you're like in the cold plunge. But then afterwards, because of that norepinephrine and that adrenaline in your body, your focus, your attention is actually narrowed, almost like it's like laser focused. So because of that, you're able to either articulate something, learn better. So like 20 minutes after your cold plunge experience is when you take that negotiation, is when you take that meeting, is when you do that presentation. So you can actually time it for your benefit, actually, which is cool.
We should cold plunge before a podcast, Max, and then not, and we'll see how articulate we are comparatively.
We'll just do it in the middle 5 minutes. It's just 5 minutes of us breathing. It's a super weird interlude in the podcast.
So it sounded like earlier you were saying cold adapted is not a good thing and you won't get the stimulus. Are you not cold adapted?
Yeah, it's such a good question. You want to make sure. I've experienced cold adaptation where I wasn't getting benefits. I wasn't getting I can feel, after consecutively cold plunging for days and days and days, you can feel whether your body's actually getting the stimulus and the response or not. And so after like, I think it was like 16 minutes, I was like, oh no, I'm cold adapted. I can sit here without really having too much of a response. And so when that happens, you actually just take a break, you stop, and then you can kind of revisit and come back, just like anything else. Yeah, so taking a break sometimes is a really good thing, but you can mitigate that by counting walls with the resistance and focusing on the resistance. And then, yeah, playing with time, temperature, duration, and then number of times per week. And then just noticing how your body's feeling. And if you do start approaching cold adaptation where you just don't feel like you're getting the same response, then I would just take a break and come back to it.
That's so crazy because I thought the goal would be to get over that thing, expand your comfort zone, and not have cold affect you, but actually the effect of the miserable suck is what you want. Ugh.
I like the benefits for sure. Some people like to be cold adapted so they can, do winter swimming all day long or all year long in, cooler countries. Or it helps them with their job, or it helps them with, their commute. Like some people actually use cold exposure to keep and stay cold adapted, which is really interesting. So it depends, just like every good answer.
And you mentioned that shivering helps with your metabolism. I've heard that you're supposed to fight shivering and tell your body not to do that so that you torch brown fat or something. Can you
Yeah.
speak on that?
So it's a really, yeah. So what cold exposure does, and we didn't really touch on brown fat and white fat, and beige fat. So there's different types of fat. So just to back up a little bit, fat is really just an energy storage, right? When you have more energy, you're able to leverage it, or when you have more fat, excuse me, you're able to leverage it where when you need it, in terms of metabolizing that as energy. And white fat has no mitochondria in it. They're not metabolically active cells. They're just storage. And so when you start adding mitochondria, that's when that color changes and those cells become metabolically active. And when you have a metabolically active cell, it requires energy. That cell has a mitochondria in it and it requires energy to continue, which increases your baseline metabolism. So even if it's marginal, I'd much rather have, metabolically active fat cells than just storage. Because over time, when it's
Lazy
compounded
fat
over
versus
yeah, exactly. It's like,
I
I don't
want
want to have
my
lazy.
fat to be lean and athletic.
You want to be less efficient.
Yeah.
Isn't you're trying to make your body less efficient so you're burning more?
If you have more mitochondria and more beige and brown fat, then for sure, yeah. But if you just have white adipose tissue and white fat, then it's just storage. So
Yeah.
those are the different types of fat. And then in terms of shivering, I definitely encourage shivering. I think shivering is really great for your body. And the reason for that, and this is just another example, but I don't know if you remember those like National Geographic or Discovery Channel shows where there would be like a predator, there'd be prey, the predator would chase the prey, and then if the prey got away, it would like uncontrollably shake like a gazelle or a zebra or something like that. I'm not sure if you've seen any of these shows, but that's actually their trauma and their experience leaving the body. It doesn't get stored. Humans don't do that. We store all of it. So it's actually a really great way to shake up like stored trauma in your body and to help move it out of your body. I know it's more of like a Wooniverse answer as to why you would shiver. Wooniverse. Yeah. But it's definitely something that I've seen has benefited a lot of people in terms of anything that they might be struggling with, especially if it's like PTSD related. So I encourage shivering for your metabolism and then for moving energy through the body for those two reasons.
There is science behind the Taylor Swift hit "Shake It Off." Oh
Shake it
my
off.
goodness!
Yeah.
Wow, that's so crazy.
I hate to jump away, but we did cold. Can you talk about sauna? It seems like you have that in your bag of tricks also.
Yeah, there's definitely, I mean, sauna, like cold and hot and breath and all these things, these primal um, experiences and techniques have been around forever. Like sweat lodges, and I mean, in terms of Finnish sauna, like we've had it ingrained in our culture forever. So I mean, in Finland, sauning is actually a way to connect with your family, to connect with your community. There's a community aspect and human connection aspect to it. There's also a spiritual aspect to it. So when you pour, the water on the rocks, there's like a tradition in that. There's scent in that, where it's eucalyptus leaves or birch leaves or, essential oils, things like that. So I'm sure you've been in a sauna. There's different types of saunas. There's Nordic saunas, Finnish saunas, wet saunas, dry saunas, infrared saunas, and there's all these benefits associated with it. But really, it's about detoxifying your body, sweating out impurities. And one thing to make sure of is that you're hydrated. Having 16 ounces of water before, during, and after will make sure that your blood plasma volume stays where it should be. And you're not having an insulin response, as an example, is because if you're dehydrated enough, you can actually have a glycemic index change where your insulin will respond even though you haven't eaten anything, and your blood sugar actually hasn't changed at all, but your blood plasma volume has changed, so the concentration of your blood sugar has gone up, which is like super interesting. So that would be a reason as to why you would definitely want to remain hydrated when you're sauning. 57 minutes a week for longevity, for hermetic stress, and to detoxify your body while remaining hydrated, and not just hydrated and drinking water, but hydrated where you're having potassium, magnesium, calcium, all the minerals, to make sure that you're getting the minerals in while you're sweating out, and whatever toxins you're sweating out, whether it's alcohol, whether it's other things in your body, who knows, right?
Pre-workout.
It's really, yeah, exactly.
Anger.
But yeah, definitely something for sure to practice and be practiced. I would say at least once a week.
Once a week. Okay, so not 8.14 minutes a day. This is a all at once thing.
Yeah, you don't. I mean, you don't have to do it all at once. You can do it with contrast therapy, where you're really giving your body and your nervous system a workout by putting it in a hot environment and then contrasting it with cold. And if you are doing a cold hot cycle, between the hot and the cold, ensure there's rest periods to make sure that your body is having a moment to recalibrate, because going from hot to cold can actually, if your body's not used to it, that change in blood pressure, that change in body temperature, and that drastic contrast can actually lead to fainting. And I've seen it happen before at some facilities where folks might not be educated on the actual protocols, or they might not follow the cycle through. And that change in their blood pressure and their body temperature was a little bit too much. And so they get lightheaded, or they might fall down, or they might stumble and see stars, so to speak. So I would just caution, if you're doing contrast therapy, make sure to rest for 5 to 10 minutes in between each.
You're describing the opposite of what me and my friends used to do in college. Just, right to the sun, and now jump in the ice pool, and then back into the sun, and then back into the, we were just doing it. Stupid,
Yeah.
So it's nice to be
feels
validated.
Really good. I understand. It feels really good. There's just, I'm at Unbounded, I'm like the safety police with everything. Like I start in the safe area, and then once everyone's good there, then we can start introducing levels of risk. And so, yeah. But no, for sure.
And this,
I've done. Go ahead, Allie.
Yeah. Well, the journey from just putting your hands in to whatever you do with your full head and then moving around so your body doesn't heat up the water around you, is that like years? Or how quickly can you move through getting your body okay with it?
Yeah. And what Allie's referring to is when you move in cold water as well, or hot water, it doesn't really matter. You have this little barrier between your skin and the environment, where your skin is trying to make the temperature of the air or the water closer to your skin's temperature. So if you're in cool water, it's going to heat up the little micro barrier around your skin. So if you're moving, it actually doesn't get the opportunity to do that. So it feels harder, it feels colder, and it feels more challenging, and your body temperature actually decreases sooner. So if you're looking to build up your tolerance and pull on those levers, it's really, it is different for everyone, but having a baseline and understanding where your baseline is of, let's say, 10 degrees Celsius water, or let's say 40 degree or 50 degree water for 2 minutes, fully submerged up to your shoulders. Then you can start playing with time, temperature, surface area, and then other protocols like getting in and out. If you want to, really challenge your metabolism. because that cool water, or sorry, that cold blood that's in your extremities that comes back in, your core body temperature drops when you get out, and then you get back in. It's like another challenge for your body because you have cold blood already at your core, and so it decreases your core body temperature all that much more, and so you shiver a lot faster if you're doing in and outs. And then if you're doing moving water, it's just more challenging because you don't have that little micro barrier built up.
Have you
Yeah.
ever worn a CGM and done in and outs? Have you seen the change?
Yes, I have. You can actually, it's very, very subtle and it's small, but it is, to me, it's significant in that there is a change. And so, and I know there's a lot more studies coming out with this type of work, especially on metabolism. And it's a touchy subject because, you know, certain scientists and certain folks that are doing these studies don't believe it's significant enough. And where my school of thought is that even if it's slight, even if it's a little bit, even if you convert, you know, some white fat into beige or brown and making it more metabolically active over time, over years, if that, you know, one cell requires more energy and your metabolism is influenced because of that, then you're in better shape, even if it's slight. Yeah.
Do you think there's a difference? No, yeah, I'll take it. I'm wearing two right now because I'm all about it. Nature versus tub. Is this going to be a woo answer? Like,
versus tub.
Is there a big difference?
No. It's a huge difference in that running outdoors versus running on a treadmill is a difference. So if you're in a cold tub or if you're in a cold shower, yeah, you don't get to connect with nature. You don't get to see what's going on. It feels a lot longer. It feels a lot harder. For me, some people feel safer. So it could just be a preference thing. Some people feel safer on a treadmill. But if you're outdoors, there's other elements to consider like wind, wind and ice, especially ice. So ice and wind are two factors, and current as well. If it's moving water, they're all factors to consider, and they're all additional safety considerations to make. However, the benefits to cold plunging outside is you get to actually activate a primitive part of your brain where you're like almost able to problem solve in real time, just like climbing a mountain, you know, versus climbing a rock wall. There's certain elements that you actually have to use your brain for to problem solve when you're actually swimming in cold, icy water. And that's, you know, other than the wind, like how thick the ice is. And it's a common misconception that like thin ice is not dangerous. Thin ice is the most dangerous, not only for like walking out, but when you're actually in water that has thin ice chips, they're razor sharp. They're like little razors that can completely cut you much more easily than thicker ice would. So things like that are all things to consider. And then from a scientific perspective, if you're going at sunrise or sunset, you get that low horizon light and impacts your circadian rhythm, your clock genes, and then any downstream effects that your hormone cycles would have on neurochemical releases, neurotransmitter releases, hormone releases at certain times of day. So, for example, if I was cold plunging in the morning at sunrise, my melatonin timing would be set for, 12 hours later. So, like that would be just because I was outdoors and I was viewing low horizon light. So that's kind of a stack where you can actually, go cold water swimming in the morning or in the afternoon and have other benefits. And then grounding as well, just getting the negative ions from the earth to help with any acidity your body might have. Is another really great reason for it. And then, just being outdoors in nature is really good for mental health. Seeing a horizon is really good for mental health as well. So those different things can influence how your cold exposure experience goes because all of those other things are happening at the same time.
Again, we need to move, Max.
I know. So
my tub on my AstroTurf just isn't going to cut it.
You know what? It's better. It's better than nothing for sure. But for anyone who is willing to experience cold water at its finest, it's just like climbing outdoors. You want to be able to climb a mountain. You want to go to a place to do that versus like rock wall climbing. It is that much of a difference. So if you're ever up in Canada, we would love to have you both at Cold Camp.
We'd love to have
And I would be so honored to host you guys if you ever wanted to come and try it.
Well,
Love it.
thank you. I'd love to go. Thank
Yeah.
you. It looks incredible. One of the first things you mentioned was your grandma said 10 days, sunrise, sunset. Is that what
First
you're
thing she
talking
said is, "What are you doing?" Which we need to
I
say to
apologize.
ourselves, I guess.
What? She said, girl, what are you even doing?
But what did she sort of say, and what did you do? And I guess, I mean, this is sort of a very not so subtle way of asking, what should I do? Just to give your 10-day thing a shot.
Yeah, it's really about being intentional. And that was essentially the nudge that she gave me about doing something about the thing that I wasn't doing anything about, which was how low I was feeling at the time. And so even now, even if I'm doing a cold shower, I don't make it a shower. Like, I show up to it as my cold practice space. I'm like, why am I here today? Is it for my mental health? Is it for rewiring this feeling I need? Is it because I feel inflamed today and I'm hungover? Like, whatever it could be, right? And so it's really getting present to my why, understanding where my breath is, understanding whether I need to leverage it or change it, and then stepping into your cold practice space with that intention and embodied intention. So it's like, why am I doing this? Okay, I'm doing this for this reason. Okay, this is how I'm going to show up in this moment when I step into this stressful environment. And you get to embody a different energy when you do that, and it does impact the benefits for sure. And then when you regulate your body's response to that stressor, that cold, and you feel like you can just stay there, that's when I remind myself of that why. And sometimes it changes. Sometimes I step in and I need confidence, and then when I get in, I have another reason as to, why I'm there. And then I step out and I try to embody the energy I'd like to take into the rest of my day. And it really does make a difference on your confidence meter. It really does make a difference on your strength. And your recovery as well. Just like anything visual, any mindset stuff, it does make a difference. So, and then in 10 days, you can really see an impact on how it's actually influenced your day. Whether, the one thing you notice could be, oh, you know what, I didn't actually get stressed out all this week. That's interesting. Or, you know what, I was actually not hungry for, a really, this part of my afternoon, and that's typically when I get hungry. Or this changed in my routine this week, and it was to do with my strength training or my sleep schedule. And so it's really just about noticing the shift and the change from a day to day perspective. But after 10 days, you can really notice a difference. So that's why I recommend doing 10 days. And I think that's why she recommended doing 10 days. And maybe it was just an arbitrary number she just picked to be like, if you can do this for 10 days, that's a really good place to start.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you feel like that's good kind of universally, or is that specific for cold plunge? I know you mentioned that maybe breath work might not be for you, or meditation or other things. How long should one do something in general before we know if it's for you?
Such a good question. I think 10 days is a really great measure, just because when you first try anything, it takes you a little bit to kind of get your relationship going with it. So anytime I have an intervention of any kind that I'm trying to introduce, I sort of commit to doing it for 10 days at least, just to see if there is any influential change. Because once you try something once, sometimes it's just not enough to notice anything. And so, I think 10 days is a really good measure, but I actually haven't thought too much about it, Allie.
You mentioned hangovers. Do you use cold plunge in that battle?
A lot of people do. I haven't been drinking for a long time or had alcohol for a little while, and I did 2 weeks ago. And I felt like such garbage. I can't tell you. I was like, wow, after you stop drinking and then you have a couple drinks, it's like, wow, what a difference my body is feeling like that hates this now. And cold plunging is really good for dealing with a hangover. So just taking vitamin B, getting hydrated, and then getting into a cold plunge so that your nervous system gets that boost of adrenaline, and your circulatory system gets that vasoconstriction, vasodilation, where your blood flow is coming back, and then you're treating inflammation. I definitely recommend it if you're hungover, and as long as you can do it safely and you're not still under the influence, for sure. But if you're feeling like garbage, it's really, really good. I find that it really helps me if I have a headache, just because of the blood flow change. And so sometimes when people go into cold water and they keep their head out, it can cause a little bit of discomfort or a differential of pressure in your head, and it's because your body is vasoconstricted from the head down and not here. So doing like a quick head dunk at the beginning of your plunge really boosts your response right away, but it can mitigate any headaches that you might get from any like blood pressure differential, because that can happen as well.
So you gotta dunk the head.
Yeah. And I think
Max, you're pro saunas for hangovers.
Oh,
yeah,
I love
saunas are
sauna for hangover. That was always my secret move. But I thought I mean, it's just easier because I'm stupider, but it was easier for me to imagine me sweating out all the vodka I had the night before. You know what I mean? I was like, oh, there it is. Get off of me. That was how I visualized it.
Yeah, it's true. Sauna is also great for that, as long as you're hydrated enough, because then you can get out and not feel so good. Yeah, depending on how hungover you are, I guess. But definitely try it next time, and see how you feel.
And don't do it drunk for sure.
Definitely don't. We
Yeah.
don't want any accidental drownings. Don't do it drunk for sure.
Well, thank you so much. This has been awesome.
Oh, I'm so glad to help. I'm really passionate about this tool. And Ali, Max, again, if you would love to try it in nature and in real life, come on up, because it's definitely a different experience and something I would recommend doing at least once in your life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you again. And how can the Fitheads find you and Unbounded online?
Yeah, so there's a couple different things that we're doing on Unbounded. So Stay Unbounded is our umbrella where we have everything, and we have any pop-ups or events will be there. And if they're local to you, we encourage you to come out. We have sunrise socials, which are really fun, cool events. And they start in the dark. Everyone arrives. They watch the sunrise. There's meditation. There's sound healing or breath work, movement piece. And then we have like a hot and cold party, and then live music. And it's really fun. So we're bringing that to different places starting next season, and different places in the world. But yeah, Toronto and Vancouver and Austin are our sort of main hubs at the moment for those in real life experiences, our classes, our workshops, our retreats. And Cold Camp is in Ontario, Canada. It's 2 hours north of Toronto. And we're almost sold out for this upcoming season. And essentially you can come as a group, or you can come as an individual, or you can get certified as a level 1, level 2, or level 3 primal wellness cold therapist. And so we do the education arm as well. And then because of all of the safety, all the protocols, all of the standards, we're creating something called Unbounded Alliance, which will be live in 2024 at the beginning of 2024, so probably January, February. And essentially it's going to be a resource and a governing body for studios and practitioners that are leading these types of experiences, to make sure that they have all the resources available and that people are doing it safely, so we can help ensure that that's more regulated, at least, so that there are less dangers happening. So lots of in real life experiences at Stay Unbounded, Stay Unbounded on Instagram, and you can find me at lisakricfalusi.com or Lisa Kricfalusi on Instagram if you'd like to reach out to me directly.
Awesome.
Amazing.
And thank you so much to the Fitheads. If you can rate and review on Apple Podcasts, that helps us out a whole lot. And we'll see you next week.